Y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is. It's your boy Pharaoh the God, always on the job. I got five. Let's talk. Welcome to another episode of I Got Five. Let's Talk, the podcast platform. And y'all know what time it is. It's that time again to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend. Share, like, and subscribe. Don't hide. Let's get straight into this content today of the war report. I know I gave everybody yesterday a little insight to what was going on in Africa and why it's the war no one wants you to see. And since I've been talking about it, I never really gave no clarity to outside forces. And I did that on purpose because I wanted people to wonder or go search. So now today's episode will be the facts of France versus Africa in the war report. Let's get started.
Good evening, everyone. I hope this message reaches you in peace because tonight, what I'm about to tell you will disturb that peace. At exactly 2:30 a.m. in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, the night was calm. The streets were empty, the curfew still in place, and only the sound of the wind brushed against the iron gates of the presidential compound. And then, the silence broke. Witnesses heard distant explosions, a burst of gunfire, then nothing, only the deep, electric quiet of fear. Within minutes, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young soldier who became president, was the target of a coordinated assassination attempt. But this was not an ordinary coup, not a random act of violence. What unfolded before dawn was something far more precise, far more deliberate. According to internal defense sources, this was an operation bearing foreign fingerprints, a shadow mission marked by intelligence-level planning, communication jamming, and near-surgical timing. And the question that now shakes West Africa and should concern the world is simple. Who wanted Ibrahim Traoré dead? And why now? Because this man is more than a leader. For millions, he has become the face of African defiance. The soldier who told the world that Africa would no longer bow to foreign powers. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the attack they hoped you'd never hear about and expose the forces moving silently behind the walls of power. If this was not just an assault, but a warning, then Africa's struggle for freedom has entered a darker, more dangerous chapter. Stay with me. The evidence we uncover may change the way you see not just Burkina Faso, but the entire map of power itself. And if you're new here, subscribe now, because what you'll hear in the next few minutes, most newsrooms won't dare to say out loud. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, Ouagadougou became a battlefield without warning. The assault on the life of Captain Ibrahim Traoré began just before dawn, a time chosen not by chance, but by strategy. Night attacks are meant to confuse, to isolate, to create panic before a command chain can even wake up. According to multiple security sources, the operation began around 2:30 a.m. when a convoy of unmarked vehicles approached the outer perimeter of the presidential compound in the Koziam district. Surveillance footage, now under state protection, reportedly captured the first explosion near the western fence line, followed by brief flashes of gunfire. In less than 5 minutes, communications across the area went dark. Mobile networks crashed, emergency frequencies jammed, and the entire capital slipped into silence. Witnesses later described seeing black SUVs with military-grade antennas driving with headlights off. Some claim they carried foreign-made communication rigs equipment rarely seen outside specialized intelligence units. The precision of their maneuvers suggested something more than a domestic mutiny. This was a choreographed breach, executed by people who understood both military architecture and psychological warfare. Inside the compound, elite guards from the Presidential Security Regiment held their ground. One officer, speaking anonymously, said, "We knew they weren't locals. The way they moved, the coordination, it wasn't Burkina Faso." By 2:46 a.m., a counteroffensive was launched. The attackers were repelled before they could reach the inner courtyard, but the exchange left bullet scars across the walls and the hearts of those who defended them. The government immediately ordered a lockdown of the capital. Airspace was restricted. Checkpoints sprang up overnight.
Workplace retaliation.
military movements were halted. For ordinary citizens, it felt like the city itself had stopped breathing. By dawn, the first official statement was issued. A serious security incident has been neutralized. The president is safe. Investigations are underway. Short, measured, but behind those words, chaos lingered. Within hours, Burkina Faso's intelligence branch began sweeping the scene. They recovered encrypted radios, satellite transceivers, and fragments of tactical drones. Forensic analysts noticed Western serial codes etched beneath scratched paint. Digital forensics teams traced interference signals to foreign IP nodes, routed through civilian data centers in West Africa, patterns consistent with contractor-grade intelligence operations. An internal memo from the Defense Council, leaked to a regional journalist, reportedly described the event as a hybrid assault, part physical, part electronic, part psychological. That phrase, hybrid assault, has now become the most whispered term in security circles across the continent. Hybrid warfare, in plain terms, means this: a nation attacked without a declaration of war, no armies crossing borders, no uniforms, just code, cash, and covert control. For Captain Ibrahim Traore, this wasn't the first time someone tried to silence him. Less than a year ago, a similar attempt was uncovered before execution. That incident, quietly suppressed at the time, had been blamed on internal divisions, but this one was different. Too clean, too silent, too foreign. And yet, even after the attack failed, the mystery deepened. Intelligence officers say several suspects were detained individuals allegedly trained abroad, possessing multiple passports and encrypted devices. Government sources neither confirmed nor denied the arrests, citing operational confidentiality. In the streets, fear met disbelief. Vendors opened shops late. Children were kept home from school. Rumors swept across the capital. Foreign commandos, traitors inside the palace. Electronic sabotage from the sky. The government urged calm, but in a city where the internet flickered like a candle, calm was hard to find. Military patrols now guard every major intersection. The air is heavy with suspicion, and in that tension, a dangerous question echoes through Burkina Faso's cafes, markets, and barracks. Was this really an assassination attempt, or a message from powers who believe Africa must never stand alone? International observers quickly took note. Across regional intelligence networks from Accra to Dakar, encrypted chatter suggested foreign coordination. A European defense analyst in Geneva told our correspondent, the tactics used here, simultaneous jamming, decoy maneuvers, layered communication interference, are textbook signals of a contractor-assisted operation. We've seen these before, in theaters where deniability is as important as victory. To the average viewer in the United States, this might sound distant, but the implications stretch far beyond Africa, because these operations, often funded indirectly through private military and intelligence contracts, fall under budgets few civilians ever see. They exist in the gray zones where accountability disappears behind corporate fronts and humanitarian missions. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation once seen as peripheral, has suddenly become the center of a geopolitical storm. It holds gold, uranium, and a strategic position in the Sahel, a corridor connecting insurgencies, resources, and rival powers. To control it is to control a gate to Africa's future. As the investigation unfolds, officials warn that this was not the end, but the beginning of a longer confrontation, one that won't just be fought with bullets, but with algorithms, influence, and silence. And for the people of Burkina Faso, that silence is the hardest part, because no matter what the government says, they now live with a haunting truth. Someone out there, somewhere beyond their borders, wanted to decide who leads them. The next time, will the walls hold? Will the president survive another dawn? Or will the shadow war finally step into daylight? Where are you watching from? Because tonight, this story isn't just about Burkina Faso, it's about a world where sovereignty itself is under siege. By midday, the world had heard whispers. Something had happened in Burkina Faso, but the details, the truth, were still trapped behind curfews, encrypted signals, and fear. The first images leaked online. Armored vehicles patrolling empty streets, soldiers scanning rooftops, and civilians frozen in their doorways. What was supposed to be a quiet recovery day turned into a city gripped by suspicion, and at the heart of that silence stood one man, Captain Ibrahim Traore. When the state television signal returned that evening, millions tuned in. The broadcast began without music or ceremony, only the flag fluttering behind him, and his voice, calm and low. He did not speak of revenge. He did not name enemies, but his words carried the weight of defiance. Burkina Faso's sovereignty will not be negotiated. He said, "We will not bow, and we will not be bought." For many, it was more than reassurance. It was a declaration of war, not on any country, but on the invisible empire of manipulation that has haunted Africa for decades. Outside, crowds gathered in spontaneous unity. Some wept, some prayed, others raised their fists and chanted his name. The same man they had feared dead that morning was now alive on their screens, unshaken. For the people, he had become the unbreakable one, the young soldier who defied the fate of so many African leaders before him. Yet behind the cheers, the machinery of power was already shifting gears. International phone lines buzzed. Embassies requested emergency updates. Western analysts debated whether this would push Burkina Faso further from democratic transition. But in African circles, the question was different. Had a red line just been crossed? Within 24 hours, the African Union issued a statement condemning any attempt to destabilize a sovereign state. ECOWAS, whose relations with Burkina Faso have been strained since Traore's takeover, urged restraint and dialogue. Both messages sounded neutral, diplomatic, cautious, but inside Ouagadougou, people heard them as hollow because they remembered history. They remembered how words of concern often preceded interference. By contrast, the U.S. State Department released a short, controlled statement. The United States had no involvement and supports regional stability. In Brussels, a NATO spokesperson went further, insisting that the alliance operates transparently and in accordance with international law. But to many Africans, these denials only deepened suspicion. For years, such phrases, transparency, stability, partnership, have been used to camouflage influence. And now, as evidence pointed to foreign fingerprints, those words sounded more like alibis than assurances. The Burkinabe press, under strict verification, began to leak fragments of the investigation, confiscated radios, encrypted USB drives, and interrogation transcripts. One report claimed that 2 detained operatives spoke French with European accents. Another alleged they carried diplomatic credentials from an NGO with ties to private defense contractors. The government neither confirmed nor denied. On social media, the information war erupted. Anonymous accounts posted photos claiming to show captured foreigners. Others spread false rumors that Traore had been injured or evacuated. By the time the military's media task force began fact-checking, the damage was already done. This, experts warned, was the new face of destabilization. Not through bombs, but through confusion. Not through invasion, but infiltration. A cybersecurity analyst in Bamako summed it up. The most dangerous weapon isn't a rifle. It's doubt. When people begin to doubt their leader, their army, or their own eyes, the enemy has already entered their mind. In the markets of Ouagadougou, that doubt was everywhere. Some whispered of betrayal from within the palace. Others swore they saw foreign drones. Teachers told students to stay indoors. Taxi drivers refused to drive near government buildings. The capital was calm, but it was the kind of calm that follows shock, not peace. Meanwhile, inside Burkina Faso's military command center, the leadership convened through the night. Security chiefs briefed the president on intercepted signals and digital traces. 3 findings stood out. Communications between unidentified operatives and external nodes linked to European data clusters. Electronic interference patterns identical to NATO training simulations used in previous hybrid operations. Evidence of local collaboration, suggesting that some insiders may have facilitated access points to the compound. The findings were explosive, too explosive to announce. Instead, the government chose silence, stating only that investigations were ongoing. But inside the corridors of power, few doubted what this meant. The attack had been bigger than anyone first imagined. And yet, through it all, Traore remained visible meeting troops, inspecting defenses, visiting injured guards. One photo, captured by a state photographer, showed him walking through the compound ruins with bullet holes behind him. The image went viral. To supporters, it looked like destiny itself refusing to fall. Internationally, reactions split down ideological lines. Moscow, Bamako.
If you got hit,
Ideological lines. Moscow, Bamako, and Niamey expressed solidarity. framing the event as proof of foreign subversion in Africa. Western outlets, however, portrayed Traoré as an increasingly isolated figure, suggesting internal dissent might have motivated the assault. Both narratives couldn't be true, but in modern geopolitics, truth matters less than perception, and perception is the weapon everyone fights to control. By the third night, analysts said what no official dared to admit publicly. The attack might have failed physically, but it succeeded psychologically. It had fractured the invisible bond between trust and safety. For the average Burkinabe citizen, every siren now feels like a countdown. Every blackout, a question. Every rumor, a spark. Because the question remains, if they could reach this far once, what's to stop them from trying again? As one security researcher told a journalist in Accra, the real target was never just Traoré. The target was belief that Africa could lead itself without permission. And that realization, more than the gunfire or the smoke, is what now keeps Ouagadougou awake at night. The dust from the attack has settled. The wounded are healing, but the fear remains, quiet and heavy, like thunder waiting in the distance. They tried to kill a man. Instead, they awakened a storm. In the days that followed the failed assassination attempt, Burkina Faso was not the same. The smoke had cleared, but something deeper, invisible, and corrosive hung in the air. The attack didn't just wound the presidency, it pierced the nation's sense of security. In the capital, the rhythms of life slowed to a crawl. Markets opened late. Church bells rang with hesitation. Soldiers stood guard at intersections where children used to play. Fear became a currency traded in whispers, carried in every conversation. Ordinary citizens spoke in codes, lowering their voices when discussing the president's name. They tried to take him, one vendor said, and if they failed once, they will not stop. That sentence spread faster than any official statement. The Ministry of Information broadcast calm, but the calm felt scripted. Beneath the surface, ministries were tightening their ranks, filtering communications, vetting personnel. Several civil servants vanished from offices on leave. The official bulletin said, but those who knew them said otherwise. They were under investigation for suspected collaboration. The shock had turned inward. Burkina Faso was now a nation scanning itself for betrayal. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, meanwhile, appeared on national television again, this time flanked by senior officers. His tone was firm but somber. He thanked citizens for their vigilance and courage and vowed that the state would cleanse itself from within. The words sent a chill across the bureaucracy. Within 48 hours, dozens of mid-level officials were reassigned. Several were detained for questioning. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty was now the nation's highest currency. But even as the government tightened control, international pressure began to mount. Western media outlets ran headlines describing a crackdown and internal purges. Diplomats in Ouagadougou requested clarifications. The United Nations expressed concern for civil freedoms. Yet on the ground, many Burkinabe citizens saw these reports as tone-deaf. To them, this was not about democracy versus repression. It was about survival, about defending a country that had nearly lost its leader to an invisible war. Across social media, patriotic hashtags emerged. We stand with Traoré. Africa will not kneel. Sovereignty is sacred. In markets and military barracks, people wore red armbands symbolizing the blood spilled for independence. And though fear lingered, it fused with pride. Still, that pride came at a price. The attack had frozen several critical projects, security reforms, mining contract audits, infrastructure investments. Foreign investors hesitated, citing instability. Humanitarian organizations delayed operations. For a landlocked nation already balancing on thin margins, these pauses hurt. Economists warned of a chain reaction, inflation, food strain, and growing unemployment. In the countryside, where jihadist violence still loomed, supply routes became harder to secure. Each delivery convoy now traveled under military escort. Every checkpoint felt like a reminder that Burkina Faso was at war, even if no one officially declared it. And yet, among the people, something unexpected happened. Instead of despair, a sense of defiant unity began to spread. University students held candlelight vigils for the president's guards who died defending the compound. Farmers donated grain to military canteens. In mosques and churches, prayers for protection turned into pledges of loyalty. For the first time in decades, civilians spoke of their government not as distant rulers, but as partners in resistance. A sociologist at the University of Ouagadougou called it trauma turned into identity. He explained, when a nation is attacked, It looks for meaning in the pain. For Burkina Faso, the attack has become a story of survival. But while the streets found purpose, the political scene fractured. Opposition leaders, some in exile, accused Traore of using the attack as a pretext to consolidate power. Western analysts echoed that narrative, arguing that he was drifting toward authoritarianism inside the country. Those accusations carried little weight. The people had seen the bullet holes. They had heard the explosions. To them, this wasn't about ideology. It was about sovereignty. Still, the international isolation grew. Some aid programs were suspended. Western embassies reduced staff. Burkina Faso's foreign ministry turned to non-traditional partners, regional allies, independent traders, and new security networks emerging from neighboring states. Through it all, Captain Traore remained calm, methodical, and unyielding. In his speeches, he invoked history, Lumumba, Sankara, and Nkrumah leaders who dared to dream of self-determination and paid the price. His message was clear. Burkina Faso would not beg for survival. It would earn it. But that message carried risk. The louder his defiance, the louder the warnings from abroad. Analysts in Paris and Washington began speculating about further destabilization scenarios. The same language once used before regime changes elsewhere in Africa. Inside Ouagadougou, intelligence officers knew what that meant. When they start using those words, one colonel said, it means they are preparing the next act. And so, the nation braced for what might come, not another night of gunfire, but a slower, more suffocating kind of attack. Economic pressure, media isolation, digital sabotage. The wound from the attempted assassination had not just exposed enemies, it had revealed the country's heartbeat vulnerable. Proud and still beating, citizens now looked at the sky differently. Every helicopter, every drone light, every blackout was a question. But one thing was certain, Burkina Faso would not go quietly. And in the quiet streets of the capital, painted with fear and resilience, a new motto began to circulate among soldiers and students alike. We may be surrounded by shadows, but we are not the ones who will disappear. The assassination failed, but it awakened a new kind of nation, one forged in the dark, lit by defiance. Across the ocean, in Washington and Brussels, the attack on Captain Ibrahim Traore was treated as a developing incident, just another headline in the crowded carousel of global security updates. Developing incident, just another headline in the crowded carousel of global security updates. But within intelligence circles, the tone was very different. In closed-door briefings, Western analysts used the words concerning escalation. They discussed the growing anti-Western sentiment across the Sahel and the rising network of African states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, forming their own security alliances outside Western control. To some, it looked like independence. To others, it looked like rebellion. The U.S. publicly denied involvement in the attack. Yet even in their denial, the unease was clear. For decades, the American and European presence in Africa had operated under the banner of stability. Military bases, training missions, mining contracts, and development aid all framed as partnerships. But now, that narrative was crumbling, because here was a young African leader in his 30s telling the world that Africa did not need Western permission to defend itself. And that message was dangerous, not because it was radical, but because it was contagious. In think tanks across Washington, new papers circulated quietly, managing African nationalism, the strategic cost of sovereignty movements. Behind the polished titles lay one growing fear that Africa might no longer be an open playing field for Western interests. Across Europe, the reactions were mixed. France, already expelled from several Sahel nations, avoided direct comment but increased monitoring of regional developments. The European Union's foreign policy wing called for dialogue and democratic restoration, code words that African observers have long learned to read as veiled pressure. Meanwhile, Russia, China, and several non-aligned states moved quickly to express support for Traore. Moscow's foreign ministry called the incident an act of foreign subversion. Beijing issued a brief but pointed statement. Sovereignty must be respected in all forms. This alignment shift, subtle but seismic, showed that the battle for Africa's future was no longer just between nations. It was a contest of ideologies, dependency versus destiny. For the American audience, this is where the shock should settle in, because whether they realize it or not, their tax dollars, their technology, and their private defense firms are often entangled in the machinery that fuels this shadow war. What happened in Burkina Faso isn't an isolated African crisis. It's a mirror held up to the West's legacy. A reminder that every action taken to ensure stability carries a silent question. Stability for whom? As global media continues to debate, one thing becomes undeniable. Ibrahim Traore has become more than a name. He's become a fault line between two worlds, one clinging to control, the other demanding freedom. And if this small nation, landlocked, surrounded, defiant, can survive an attack by unseen powers, then what message does that send to the rest of the continent? The world is watching. The question is, who will blink first? Burkina Faso now stands at a crossroads between hope and hostility, between independence and isolation. The attack may have failed, but the tremors it unleashed continue to reshape the nation's destiny. Inside the presidential compound, the bullet holes have been patched, but not forgotten. Captain Ibrahim Traore has emerged from the ordeal more cautious, yet more resolute. His public appearances are rarer, his security tighter, his tone sharper. Each word now feels deliberate, as if every sentence carries the weight of a nation's survival. He speaks of unity, of vigilance, of building an Africa that no longer asks for permission to exist. His message resonates far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Across the continent, young leaders echo his defiance. Older ones measure their silence carefully, because everyone understands. Standing with Traore means challenging a global order that has long dictated the limits of African freedom. At home, reconstruction has become both physical and psychological. The government is investing heavily in digital defense, community vigilance programs, and alliances with neighbors who share the same vision of self-determination. Schools are teaching sovereignty as a civic value, not just a political slogan. The nation's wounds are slowly turning into armor, but the road ahead is treacherous. Economic sanctions loom, international aid remains uncertain, and whispers of future plots persist in the alleys of Ouagadougou. For every loyal soldier guarding the state, there may still be unseen hands waiting to strike again. Yet in this uncertainty, a new confidence is growing. For the first time in decades, ordinary Burkinabe citizens speak of destiny instead of despair. They say the attack was not a defeat. It was a revelation, a reminder that their freedom, like their future, must be defended every day, in every way. And as night falls over the capital, the words painted on a wall near the palace seem to capture the moment best. We were tested in darkness, and we did not break. The question now is not whether Burkina Faso will endure. The question is how far its courage will travel, and who, across the continent, will dare to follow. The night they tried to kill Captain Ibrahim Traore will be remembered not as the night Africa broke, but the night Africa woke. Because when bullets failed, something deeper began to stir. A consciousness, a clarity that sovereignty is not a slogan. It is a battlefield. In the months to come, the investigation will continue quietly, cautiously. Official reports may name no foreign power. Diplomats will insist on lack of evidence. Contracts will be rewritten. Allegiances will shift. But in the shadows, the message is already clear. Someone, somewhere, cannot tolerate the idea of an Africa that governs itself. And so, this story will not end in Ouagadougou. It will echo through Niamey, Bamako, Accra, Addis Ababa, and beyond. Every young soldier, every restless student, every nation questioning the price of dependence will remember this. When they aimed for Traore, they were aiming at all of us across the Atlantic. Policymakers will call it instability. Analysts will call it nationalism. But history will call it something else the moment the ground shifted under the old empire's feet. Because if this could happen once, it can happen again. And next time, the world may not be able to hide behind denials or data. For the people of Burkina Faso, survival has become a statement. Every sunrise over Ouagadougou now whispers defiance. Every flag raised at dawn says, "You failed to erase us." And for the rest of us, the observers, the skeptics, the distant witnesses, this story forces an uncomfortable truth. Sovereignty is no longer protected by borders. It is protected by awareness. If you've watched this far, you already know this is not just...
Hey, y'all know what it is, man. That is the story of what's going on in Burkina Faso, in Africa. And that's not the only country. You have it's 3 states, man. I keep forgetting. Oh, it's Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. All 3 of these states form the Sahel states, right? But it's not the Sahel region. These are 3 different continents or countries. My bad. These are 3 different countries within Africa. And if I'm not mistaken, they just made Ibrahim Traore, the one that we just heard about they tried to assassinate. They made him president of all 3 countries. And what they are doing are trying to get other African states to believe in Pan-Africanism. And all that means is Africa for the Africans, for the black Africans. China has for the Chinese. It's time for Africa to stop having puppet masters. People, that shit is getting old. Being controlled by a foreign faction is crazy work. It's just crazy. I am from this country. Why is there somebody of foreign power controlling my country? Whether it be here in America or in Burkina Faso. It's the same thing, man. But they don't want us to see this war because this war involves liberty, injustice, equality on an international scale. Remember, I always say that when you say certain things, you endorsing certain things. A lot of people might sit up here and say, well, Africa ain't ready to step on the stage. When has anybody let Africa step on the stage to fall on their face? When has Africa been able to get on the international stage with strict Pan-Africanism? Nobody has gave them a place on stage to do what they need to do or what they think they need to do for the betterment of Africa. Because shit, what everybody else been doing all these centuries ain't been working. France, Britain, UK, America, hell, even China. Been there for hundreds of years. At least, you feel me, 50 years. Decades. And people still have the thought that Africa is an underdeveloped nation. Why? How is Africa an underdeveloped nation when it helps sustain France, Britain, UK, Germany, America? How do you look to a poor country to get rich? I don't see niggas going around asking bums, hey man, how you get rich, man? What you do? Like, I don't see niggas exploiting bums for knowledge. I see them exploiting bums to put them in housing so they can get money and shit like that. I don't see it happening. Africa needs to fall over its own feet, slip on the stair. I don't know what it needs to do to prove to the international world that they are trying. You know what I mean? You can't say they can't do it if you don't never let them do it. But if you're stopping them from doing it, you're endorsing a racist ideology. I'm not sorry. And I will say it again. If you believe that Africa does not have the stability to do it for self, may need a little help, a little, and I don't know, some weapons they may need or may not need. But let Africa do it. Cause shit, nigga, look at what's going on in France. They country fucked up. They got protests going on. Look at America. We got a weird ass, fruity pebble looking ass nigga in the presidency. Shit, let the Africans, they probably could do it better. They the only ones that ain't been on the stage. Controlling nothing. You might have had some coons up there. You might have had some Ricky Davidsons up there or something, but you ain't had no Patrice Lumumbas. Thomas Sankara. No Idi Amin's. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And Kwame Nkrumah. So I don't want to hear all that, oh, Will Ferrell, they do have African leaders and they bleeding the country dry. And these are the people that Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are trying to get rid of because they mean no good to Africa nor Pan-Africanism. They're just trying to align their own pockets. Whatever it is they can align their pockets with. And that will ultimately mean keeping people in check. Keeping people under a certain agenda that ain't healthy. It's just not.
Certain nations continue to treat Africa as a private domain to the point where their parliamentarians, like the slavers of yesterday who decided on the fate of millions of Africans, now presume to legislate on the internal affairs of the sister country, the Republic of Niger. The Confederation condemns the pseudo-humanistic and neo-colonialist posture, which reflects a logic of mercantilist and imperialist exploitation of the continent. Indeed, there is a common thread between the slavery and transatlantic trade of the past and the terrorism plaguing the Sahel today, namely the enrichment of colonial and imperial powers on one side and the impoverishment and the fragmentation of Africa on the other. In the past, these powers built their economies by draining Africa of its human labor. Today's African natural resources are being plundered using strategies of terror and endless conflict.
Before we proceed with the speech, it is important to note that this is a statement delivered today by the representative of Burkina Faso, speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, during the United Nations session addressing slavery as a crime against humanity. We now invite you to listen to the complete speech. We now invite you to listen to the complete speech.
Excellence, Madame.
Your Excellency, Madam President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the member countries of the Confederation of States of Sahel, namely Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. On this day of commemoration of the abolition of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, the member countries of the Confederation bow with respect before the memory of all of the innocent people who suffered unjustly from these abhorrent acts. It is deeply regrettable that societies calling themselves civilized deemed it normal at a certain point in their history to systematically reduce other human beings to the status of things, to torture them, to sell them, to deprive them of all dignity, and to deny them their humanity. Today's ceremony must not be limited to simply honoring the memory of the more than 10 million Africans who were deported and enslaved in inhumane and degrading conditions. It must also serve as an opportunity for us to identify the responsibility for the harm done to Africa and to humanity as a whole, and to affirm a strong collective commitment to act for justice so that such atrocities never happen again. Madam President, on this subject, some states prefer silence and prefer to suffocate the truth about these macabre events. At the time when a series of measures are brought into being to recall and commemorate other human tragedies, sometimes of far lesser magnitude, the Confederation of Sahel States believes, on the contrary, that the truth must be brought to light and the reparations must be pursued. And the current context calls for this, as certain nations continue to treat Africa as a private domain, to the point where their parliamentarians, like the slavers of yesterday who decided on the fate of millions of Africans, now presume to legislate on the internal affairs of the sister country, the Republic of Niger. The Confederation condemns the pseudo-humanistic and neo-colonialist posture, which reflects a logic of mercantilist and imperialist exploitation of the continent. Indeed, there is a common thread between the slavery and transatlantic trade of the past and the terrorism plaguing the Sahel today, namely the enrichment of colonial and imperial powers on one side and the impoverishment and the fragmentation of Africa on the other. In the past, these powers built their economies by draining Africa of its human labor. Today's African natural resources are being plundered using strategies of terror and endless conflict, and this is done through terrorist mercenaries and other criminal armed groups that are financed and instrumentalized. Madam President, Faced with the reflexes of these slave trading and imperialist states that refuse to accept the emancipation of the peoples of the Sahel and of Africa, the Confederation of Sahel States remains committed to supporting any initiative aimed at restoring the dignity of African peoples, including through reparations. We therefore welcome and fully support the initiative of the African Union to adopt a resolution which categorizes slavery and the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. We also take this opportunity to thank Ghana for so eloquently voicing the continent's position on this question, and we express our deep gratitude to His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of Ghana. I thank you.
They don't want you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Burkina Faso on behalf of the Confederation of States Sahel.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank the President of the General Assembly for convening this important meeting. My delegation aligns itself with the statement delivered by Ghana on behalf of the Africa Group. Ethiopia joins the international community in solemn remembrance of millions of African men, women, and children who were subjected to the horrors of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. This day stands as a reminder of the gravest crime against humanity and historical injustices. The tragedy of slavery stripped generations of their humanity. The transatlantic slave trade and colonialism represent two of history's most extensive crimes against humanity, leaving legacies that continue to adversely influence Africa's contemporary socio-economic landscape and development trajectory. Slavery, apart from its cruel extractive nature, it disrupted social systems and fundamentally reconfigured economies, governance structures, and cultural institutions across Africa and beyond. As we reflect on this painful chapter, we underscore the importance of education, truth-telling, and the preservation of historical memory. We are of the view that acknowledging this gravest crime against humanity is crucial for honoring the victims and also for compensating with reparation for the atrocities committed. Addressing the structural and historical roots of inequality, including the socio-economic consequences that continue to affect people of Africa and African descent particularly, is important. Commemoration, therefore, must go beyond retrospective remembrance. It must serve as a call to confront the living consequences with courage. In the same vein, Ethiopia commends the leadership of Ghana on behalf of the Africa Group for successfully tabling the draft resolution declaration of the trafficking of enslaved Africans and the racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as the gravest crime against humanity. In conclusion, we pay tribute to the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, and also to those courageous abolitionists who fought to stop such atrocities. We hope this day would serve as a first step to renew our collective determination to rectifying the damage and build a world founded on the inherent dignity of all humanity. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ethiopia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Guinea.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my delegation aligns itself with the statement made on behalf of the African Group, and we extend congratulations to His Excellency Mr. John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana, who is an advocate for justice and reparations of Africans. We thank him for his leadership on this cause, sadly an inheritance.
I know people may ask, well, why is this? Why are we, what does this have to do with France? France was one of the colonizers of Burkina Faso and a lot of places in Africa. They were, the robbers of Africa, telling Africa, we're going to help you out. Never helped them out. And now they are trying to bridge the line and force people to recognize that the way we got over here is one of the greatest crimes to humanity. And if you don't know what that means, they're trying to get what happened to blacks in America recognized a little bit more than what happened to the Jews. That's why they keep throwing that 10 million out there. Because everybody's stuck on the 6 million Jews this and the 6 million Jews that, right? This is the war they don't want y'all to see. And this is one of the reasons they don't want y'all to see it. How come ain't nobody put this? How come the UN ain't exploded on this? Oh, all African nations went to the United Nations Council and pressed, the United Nations to declare what happened to blacks in America as the greatest human tragedy in the world. Above what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust. This is what they saying. They trying to fight for what happened to us. At the same time, they fighting to take back their homeland. This is the war they don't want you to see. I just showed y'all the video of how many times they just tried to assassinate Ibrahim Traore. You know what I mean? Trying to send his country into damnation and darkness. If y'all smart enough to say that the war in Iran is over oil, I dare y'all to dig and find out what this war is over. I dare y'all to do it. I triple dog dare you. See, a lot of people not involved in this war. Because they like, oh man, it ain't got nothing to do with no bombs. Ain't no bombs dropping. That's the killer. These people took their land back without bombs dropping. Told them we want to be the masters of our own gold, silver, lithium, and diamonds. We want to do our own thing. We tired of being up underneath y'all. Now they over there. Assassinations is jumping off. You might say, well, Pharaoh, assassinations happen in Africa a lot. And you don't find that weird? That ain't one of the things that make you go, Some just, why do they keep happening? If Africa's so poor, why y'all gotta keep killing people over there? And for sure, y'all know when they keep trying to kill a nigga, he must be doing something right. Don't let them tell you what they tell you about everybody else. Oh, the people over there are getting treated bad. It's not one of them stories. This man kicked all the whites out their country. And now they fighting for American slavery. See, blacks even say, oh man, you know, the Africans don't fight for us. They don't do this and they don't do that. Why? Because they will never show this on TV. They want you to believe that, you know, the Africans don't like us and the Africans, you know, ain't fighting for us. That's what they want you to believe. So they can keep pushing that narrative. That's what they want.
So more than 2 billion people in the world. Enslavement and the transatlantic trade is a dark chapter of our common history. And this has spread to several continents and continues to date to deeply affect our societies. For 4 centuries, anywhere between 12 to 20 millions of Africans have their lives destroyed through an odious system which anchor the capture, deportations, or racialized enslavement at the heart of their state. In the history of humanity, no crime has accumulated at the same time the same number of victims, duration, commodification, dehumanization, as was done by slavery and transatlantic trade. No crime produced...
They saying not even what Hitler did to the Jews. Ain't even what happened to the Jews from Hitler. This is what they saying, not me. It's documented though. They say nobody in history went through what the Africans and the descendants of the Africans went to. Come on now.
Consequences which were as lasting, in particular, the large-scale destruction of African societies, enshrining racialized inequalities, which unfortunately continue to be the structure of many ways of thinking, including in international relations. It's essential to reject these ways of outdated thinking and to redouble our efforts to fight against all kinds of enslavement, racism, systematic inequality, and structural injustice. Mr. President, on this day of remembrance, it is our duty to reaffirm our collective commitment to intensify our efforts to recognize historic truth and to undertake measures to provide reparations for crimes. This is not so as to reopen historic divisions, but to recognize reality and the scope of this tragedy, and to make sure that justice is done, and this is begun by recognizing facts. Reparation and justice measures have to be extended to education and awareness raising, especially through forward-looking governance systems which protect human rights, which used to exist in African societies and were deliberately weakened and destroyed by slavery. In this regard, the Kurukanfuga Charter, or the Mandinka Charter, proclaimed in 1236, have already provided the major principles of social organization and enshrined human rights, in particular the right to life and the preservation of physical integrity of everyone and the participation of women in decision-making. To conclude, my delegation would like to, on behalf of the President of Guinea, reiterates its congratulations to the Republic of Ghana for the efforts which resulted in submitting to our Assembly a draft resolution on trafficking and racial enslavement, and we urge all delegations to endorse this resolution, because by doing thus, we will be reaffirming our commitment to liberty, justice, equality, and the respect of human dignity. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Guinea. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Namibia.
This is what they don't want you to know that Africans are doing for you. They don't want you to know that the African states are trying to bring charges against America, that are trying to get recognized that what happened to our ancestors over here and they descendants and they ancestors was fucked up. They might have been quiet about it. You feel me? They ancestors might have been in cahoots about it. But better late than never. Better late than never, right? America ain't never came in on the last note late and apologized. We see everybody, they just made a new law, I think it was for Asians. Made a new law for Asians, but still can't make no law for black people. And y'all still support these motherfuckers. That's what's crazy.
Workplace discrimination.
This is what's going on in Africa right now, man. This is the war. Like, this is what's going on. Why the war with Iran and Israel is going on. Now, I know y'all like to sit up here and throw shit at the wall to see if it stick, right? But ain't every time they throw a smoke screen for everybody to talk about something that's going on behind that smoke screen? Ain't these motherfuckers at the UN? This was 1 day ago. 1 day ago. This is what they are bringing in front of the United Nations Council members to charge America and Europe with atrocities, the same thing that the Jews did after Nazi Germany. The same thing. They even charge people to this day. Old people in wheelchairs and hospice, they charge them to this day. Certain situations are being involved with Nazi Germany. This is what the African nations are bringing to the world community. And this ain't just the Sahel states that are doing this. This is African nation after African nation after African nation after African nation that is making these claims. You think America want blacks to see this? They might know about it in London and shit like that, but that shit ain't getting televised over here. They ain't talking about it over here. Oh yeah, the African nations are trying to get, recognition for the transatlantic slave trade to be marked down in history more atrocious than what happened to the Jews. Nah, ain't nobody talking about that though, huh? This is the war they don't want you to see. They do not want you to see this war. That's why you are not hearing about it. This is why I felt the need to bring up the story behind the smoke screen. The story behind the war. But people don't see it. But they know every time it's a smoke screen, something is being covered up. No, ain't nobody losing their lives. Yes, it's made to look like it's insurgents. But people get captured, goddammit. And they get captured with evidence. Now, people want to say, oh, the Africans ain't smart enough. Well, why the people ain't saying the Africans ain't smart enough to be planting evidence like this type of evidence on people? I believe they're smart, but I also believe they caught the crook with his hand in the cookie jar. I believe that. So what if they get caught? Even if they get caught, it still looks like a civil complaint. It still looks like something is going on in their country that they need to deal with. But when you get caught with European technology, jamming frequency jammers, and all this, the lights, it's hard to say I work for an African. You probably do, but where did you get now you start to see the picture. They don't produce this in Africa, so where did you get it from? Had to be flown in. Even if his boss is an African, it's going back to European intelligence. It's going back.
Mr. President, my delegation welcomes the convening of this commemorative meeting of the General Assembly to mark the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and transatlantic slave trade. Namibia aligns itself with the statement delivered by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana and African Union champion on advancing the cause of justice and the payment of reparations to Africans on behalf of the African states. My delegation wishes to recognize with appreciation the participation of Ms. Esther Phillips, first poet laureate of Barbados, and Ms. Shahada Jek, first youth poet laureate of Toronto, Canada, in this commemorative meeting. Your insightful and moving words added a significant value to our discussion, and we are grateful for your contributions. Mr. President, my delegation commends Ghana for its courage and leadership in advancing our shared commitment to addressing historical injustices committed against Africans and the people of African descent through transatlantic enslavement, colonialism, and apartheid, as well as the inequities that persist in the international economic and political orders. We recall that the atrocities of slavery, the slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, racial segregation, subjugation, and the exploitation of resources denied and violated the humanity and dignity of Africans and people of African descent. Their legacies are not confined to the past, as their social, economic, and cultural consequences continue to be experienced to this day. This year's commemoration is particularly significant due to the introduction of the resolution declaring the trafficking of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as a gravest crime against.
Yeah, I might be kind of fucked up, but you know, that nigga English, you know what I'm saying? He African, you know, I mean. Some of the other motherfuckers, I don't be wanting to hear them neither. You know what I'm saying? They be having the little
humanity.
Talk.
This resolution offers the international community a collective moment of reflection on enduring legacies of slavery and affirms in addressing the transgender.
But this is something I definitely wanted to touch on, man. You know, a lot of people, I myself, at one point in time, I see, I'm not gonna lie, man, they say the wool wasn't pulled over my eyes, or I always was abreast to, you know, political, you know, worldly political problems. Now, I'm not gonna say that. Because I was under the tutelage that Africa was slow. I was hoodwinked, bamboozled, tricked. But I took them blinders off. They don't want nobody, especially Black Americans. Everybody is pitching for Black America's attention right now. Everybody. Russia opened up their ancient library vault to show you pictures of Black Jesus that go back to ancient times. You feel what I'm saying? Iran opened up its vaults, its ancient library vaults, to show you pictures of African Jesus, African Mary, African angels. Like, what the hell? Here in America, everybody picture. Oh, y'all don't want to give us your attention. We gonna go get some new people. But excuse me, we still want y'all. No, the Africans. Everybody is telling the Black man you special. Everybody telling the Black American you special. We need your attention. But can I get your attention, please? Can I get your attention, please? It's your time to shine. The call is being made for Black Americans to wake up, and don't nobody want you to know this. This is one of the reasons. This is the reason why the war is going on right now. This is the true reason. Why? They don't want no Blacks to be seeing this in America. They give a damn if people, if the Blacks in London see it. Ain't nobody trying to, nigga, imitate London hip hop, London Black street life, London Black culture. Hell, ain't nobody even trying to imitate Jamaican Black culture, Haitian Black culture, African Black culture, Cuban Black culture, Europe Black culture, Canadian black culture, the only black culture motherfuckers around the world are interested in is black American culture. And no disrespect to the rest of the black cultures from other countries. Just ain't nobody checking for y'all like that, bro. I'm not sorry. Ain't nobody checking for y'all to come out with the latest, you know what I'm saying, nigga, moves, nigga. The latest album. The latest invention. Like, that shit happens in America, nigga. Or in Africa. And that's where it stops at. Real talk. Black Americans have a dominance when it comes to this being black shit. I know a lot of motherfuckers gonna say I'm catting off, I'm talking shit, but nah, I'm for real. When it comes to being black Americans, nigga, got the dominance in this shit. I don't give a fuck how lost in the sauce, nigga, my brothers and sisters is over here. I don't give a fuck how much, nigga, you know, we fuck up. Even from our fuck ups, we turning it great. Ain't nobody checking for no motherfucking black African culture like that, nigga, for no nothing. I'm sorry, they the only other people that invent shit and, you know what I'm saying, got the vibe, nigga. But ain't nobody checking for it like that, like they doing for the black Americans. Everybody in the world know we motherfucking special, nigga. But we don't treat ourselves like we special. This the war they don't want you to see, man. And Burkina Faso is forefronting this motherfucking war for us. Ibrahim Traore is forefronting this motherfucking war for us. I just found out the end of the last year, a couple of months ago, that Ibrahim Traore was a Muslim. At this whole time, I promise you, wallahi, I used to think the boy was Christian. But it shouldn't even matter what's the religion. What matters first is we black. Especially us over here. Especially us over here, bro. Ain't nobody special like us. Ain't nobody got it like us. But stay tuned tomorrow night. I will be giving a further in-depth of tonight about this UN Council of how the Africans is bringing charges against America without bringing charges against America. Because just by them saying to recognize it, America got to admit to they wrong. And y'all think America go do that? Not at all. Because America don't give a fuck about y'all. America don't give a fuck about nigga telling y'all to nigga jump off a bridge if you don't like it. And you ask, how do we change it? Stop buying they shit. We got too much merch out here. We got too much merch out here. We got too many people out here. But y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is, man. It's your boy Pharaoh the God, always on the job, man. I got 5 Let's Talk. And as always, it's real talk, raw talk. And it's that time again to tell a friend, to tell another motherfucking friend. Share, like, and subscribe. don't hide. Thank y'all for rocking with me, man. Sticking around, tuning in, tapping out, man. Make sure, man, you support the channel, support your boy, and above all, man, support the motherfucking movement. Y'all know the motto. Take care of each other. And if you can't do that, take care of your motherfucking self. We out.